Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. I'm so excited to continue our 8 financial steps for physicians. Today, we'll be diving into step 4. But before we do, let's take a moment to introduce the sponsor of today's episode. Pearson Ravitz' story begins with Dr. Stephanie Pearson, a passionate OB-GYN at the height of her career. But then, a shoulder injury struck during a precipitous delivery. Her dreams were shattered, leaving her unable to practice medicine. Determined to make a difference, Stephanie became an advocate for her peers, guiding them through the complex disability process. Alongside insurance expert Scott Ravitz, Stephanie founded Pearson Ravitz, a company determined to approach insurance differently. Together, they set their mission to educate and empower physicians to protect their most valuable asset, their income, and the most important people in their life, their family. Today, Pearson Ravitz serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand the unique concerns of physicians. Life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness or injury could leave you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But with a little planning and guidance, you can prepare for every possibility. Visit PearsonRavitz.com to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Ravitz advisor. All right, so we're continuing today with the 8 baby steps for physicians to get their financial house in order. Thus far, we've covered baby step 1, protect. Before we do anything else, we have to cover ourselves and our families with adequate insurance and set up an estate plan. Then, because life happens, we saved up a starter emergency fund in baby step 2. After that, we moved on to baby step 3, start investing and game plan student loans. We covered the importance of time and compounding interest to build wealth, and we went over options we have to manage our student loans. Today, we'll talk about baby step 4, knocking out high-interest debt. That's any debt over 10%. High-interest debt is a big leech on our cash flows and wealth-building ability. It keeps money flowing out of our pockets to build the wealth of others. We want that money working for us. So it's time to get that high-interest debt out of our lives. To do that, first, we have to know what debts we have. So in this step, I want you to take a moment and write down all the debts that you have and look up the interest rates on them. Credit card debts usually have the highest interest rates. According to LendingTree, the average credit card interest rate in America today is 20%. Holy cow! That's a great return for the credit card companies and a horrible deal for you. It's time to get rid of it. Get really mad at it. These companies are charging you 20% interest every month. That's on top of all the other fees that they're charging you, like annual fees, late fees, and return payment fees. Paying off this debt is going to make a huge difference on your monthly cash flow. Okay, that's great, you might be saying, but where do I find the extra money to do this? Well, the first and most obvious answer is to try to earn more. Can you boost your income by moonlighting or doing paid surveys, for example? Perhaps you have a talent or side interest that you can monetize. Switching jobs or negotiating better pay is another option. But I know not all of us have the time or the permissions from work to moonlight or do other things on the side. I know when I started my debt snowball, working more was the last thing I wanted to do. My why for financial education was to be able to spend more time with my family and my kids. So instead of trying to pick up more work, my husband and I decided to really look at where our money was going, and to try to identify where we could cut back spending to make more room between our income and expenses. And here's the other thing. $1 saved is a whole dollar added to your debt payoff ability. $1 earned is only 70 cents or so added to your debt payoff ability because of taxes. So learning how to cut back and streamline expenses can really pay off. Cutting back expenses first requires that we know where our money is going. So we need to track our spending based on certain categories. Oh boy, you might be thinking, that sounds suspiciously like the B word. Well, you're right, we're about to talk about the dreaded B word, budgeting. But before you tune out and start scrolling TikTok, hear me out. We're just talking about tracking spending for the first few months here. We're not talking about restricting fun or not living life or whatever else negative connotation you might have associated with the B word. Let's take all those societal judgments about budgeting and put them in a box. Now let's take that box and put it in the back of our mental closet for a second. We're not talking about limiting fun. We're talking about tracking our spending. If we're not tracking our spending, all we have to look at is the number in our bank account. Whether it's $100 or $10,000, it doesn't show us what the money needs to do for the rest of the month. That number doesn't show us that the mortgage needs to be paid or the kids' 529s need funding. It's like watching the game by following the score on the internet instead of being the coach and running the plays of your own life. If all you do is watch the number in the bank account, you're merely a spectator to your own financial life, watching the money go in and out based on marketing or some decision you made to finance a couch years ago. With a budget, a game plan for your money, you can now take charge of your financial life. You can decide where your money goes and then execute on that plan. It's no wonder 93% of millionaires stick to a budget. Instead of restriction, a budget gives you freedom to spend without guilt, knowing you're executing your plan. A budget helps you control your money so it doesn't control you. And the most important thing is that a budget can give us a raise without working more. It can help us eliminate unintentional spending so we can make the most of our income and align our spending with what we actually value. And I can attest that instead of feeling restricted, a good, realistic budget can actually make you feel wealthy. When we have a budget, we know where our money is going and have a plan to execute all of our saving and investing goals. So it can bring a powerful sense of relief and well-being, and that's the feeling of being wealthy. So are you convinced yet that you need a budget? I hope you are. The thing is, there's not just one way to budget. I'll go over several ways with you. But first, I'd like to go over the traditional line item zero-based budget. If you're really looking to build debt payoff ability, this is the most effective way. A zero-based line item budget is centered on the idea that every dollar that comes into the household gets a job and is accounted for. Thus, income minus expenses equals zero. You start with your take-home pay and assign money to different categories, and then you execute on that plan. But how do I know how much to allocate to each of the categories, you might ask? No two households are the same, so don't worry, I'm not going to prescribe a budget to you. You really shouldn't let anyone tell you how much you should spend. Instead, start by using your current spending as a guide. Just monitor your spending for 2 to 3 months. Start tracking what you're spending on and separate them into different categories. You can even use the budget template I made at thefrugalphysician.com. It's available for free download. If you're married, I suggest you do it with your partner at the end of the month. To get a full picture of what you're spending on, you'll need to log into all of your banking accounts. That's your checking as well as your credit cards. Most banks now have a budgeting tool where you can break down your spending and it'll do it for you. If you're going to do that, make sure you're linking your credit cards to one bank so all of your spending is in one place. You can still do it without linking, but it's a little bit more cumbersome. If you're using a budgeting tool from your bank, I still recommend that you transfer that data to a spreadsheet so that you have your data with you, because online interfaces often change and old data can get difficult to retrieve. It's easier to track where you're spending if you're spending on a card instead of cash. If you're spending cash, you'll need to keep receipts for reference or use the envelope system. By simply tracking where your money is going, you'll be able to see what spending categories are essential in your household cash flow, things like your mortgage or rent or utilities, and which categories are discretionary, like restaurants or shopping. You'll see where you may be overspending, and then you can set spending goals from there based on your savings goals. The process of tracking spending may sound cumbersome, but it can get quite streamlined over time. It takes my husband and I less than 30 minutes to account for all our spending now, but the first time it took us around 2 hours to get all the information together. It feels awkward and cumbersome at first, but much like riding a bike, once this new skill is learned, it becomes automatic. If manual spreadsheet tracking is not for you, there are apps out there to help devise a zero-based budget. Popular apps include YNAB, Personal Capital, and EveryDollar. There are usually fees associated with these apps, but the fees can be well worth it for some people, if it's going to work. If an app is free, they're likely using your data to sell things to you and bundle your data to sell to advertisers, so tread carefully. YNAB in particular has a lot of diehard fans. It is a friendly user interface and can link to credit cards and banks. But learning YNAB is a bit like learning a new EMR. It's really quite a learning curve to be able to utilize all the features effectively. Also, it asks you to manually categorize all transactions as they come in, which can be time-consuming. Additionally, you can only budget what is currently in the bank, not future income, so it requires you to be very in touch with your spending throughout the month. The reason YNAB didn't work for my husband and I was because it turned out that I was doing all the categorizing and tracking, so while I was very much in touch with our spending, my husband was not. That's not a good situation. So instead, we decided to meet in the middle and have a budget date once a month, working a spreadsheet together. That's how my husband works in project management, so that's what was comfortable for him. So anyway, choose what works for you. This is a great time to mention the benefit of a monthly budget date to a marriage and to a family's financial journey. Money disagreements are one of the top reasons for divorce in the United States. Divorce is one of the biggest hurdles to financial independence. So it's really important that couples devote some time to get on the same financial page. A monthly meeting to go over last month's spending gets both partners on the same page without finger pointing ideally, since they're both looking at the same facts. Reviewing those facts can then lead to conversations regarding money, goals, and everyone stays involved and the family makes progress. Please note, this can be done whether the spouses have joint accounts or separate accounts. As long as there's transparency, the budget date can work. So that's one way to budget, the line item zero-based budget. Another way to budget is the pay yourself first budget. This is also called a backwards budget. In this method, you set monthly goals and calculate how much money needs to go towards them monthly to meet the goal in the desired amount of time. Then you set up automatic transfers from your checking account to go to these specific goals. If saving for a particular large spend, it helps to have a separate account or bucket for each goal. Some savings accounts allow you to make buckets for individual savings goals, which can be helpful. Once the automatic transfers are set up, you have automated your savings. Then you can spend the rest and sleep soundly knowing you will be meeting your goals. The big benefit of this method is that there is no need to track expenses. However, if you're already living paycheck to paycheck, there may be a risk of overdrafting your account with this method, since you're not cutting back your spending. Since we're not tracking spending, it gives us no insight into our problem spending areas. So in general, this method works well when a family already has their spending streamlined and has plenty of room between their income and fixed expenses. Another way to budget is called the proportional budget. This budgeting philosophy was made famous by now Senator Elizabeth Warren. It's centered around the philosophy that 50% of your take-home pay should go towards your needs, 30% should go towards your wants, and 20% should go towards savings. This method is good for those who only want to check in with their spending every once in a while or who want an occasional judgment on whether they're spending reasonably. It requires you to look at your monthly spending once. If spending aligns with the above percentages, great. If your spending does not meet the above criteria, it will help you identify where you're overspending and how you might be able to fix it. The proportional method is good for someone who wants to stay in the big picture and be less detailed. However, this method doesn't directly curb impulse spending. But it is a nice guideline to follow if you're wondering how you should structure your budget and need some guidance on general spending guidelines. Okay, so now we've laid out the different ways we can track our spending. How can we cut back? Well, the biggest bang for the buck you're going to get when it comes to saving money is by being frugal with the top 3 expenses: housing, transportation, and food. The easiest way to save on housing is by not inflating the lifestyle right out of residency. You can keep living in the same house or a similar sized house to your residency house for the first few years as an attending. If you can do that, you'll be set up to make great financial progress. I know medicine already has so much delayed gratification built in, and I'm asking you to delay getting the doctor house for another couple of years. But look at it this way, it's just a couple of years. Once you've worked the baby steps, you can go ahead and inflate your lifestyle up a bit, and you'll be able to sleep better knowing that you have your financial house in order. That house that you have won't become a curse that you carry around. I should mention that renting can be a good option in this time frame. Renting a smaller place for a couple of years as a young attending is advisable for many reasons. One of them is that almost half of new attendings leave their first job. It's important to know whether you're going to like your job or not before you buy your first forever home. Another reason renting is good is because you don't have all the maintenance costs of home ownership. Homeownership comes with a lot of unexpected large expenses. And when you rent, you're letting the landlord take care of that and your housing cost is set. So if you can keep living like a resident after residency for a couple of years, you can really set yourself up. Trust me, it's a lot easier to keep living like you were living than to inflate your lifestyle and then have to deflate again like my family did. But that is also another option if you have already inflated. The big picture is housing. Try to keep it like your residency house for the first couple of years as an attending. If you can, when you inflate, it's nice to buy exactly the amount of house that you need and not any more, because houses have a lot of costs associated with them. The next line item to look at in your budget is transportation. Most cars are depreciating assets. The value of most new cars goes down significantly the minute you drive that car off the lot. It doesn't make much sense to take out debt to finance a liability. Most cars are a liability. They're not assets. They're not cash flowing, income producing things that are going to add to your net worth. They're an expense. So because the value of cars goes down over time, so it doesn't make much financial sense to take out debt to finance a liability. But realistically, sometimes we have to take out debt to buy a car because in most parts of this country, it's hard to live without a car. So try to buy a gently used car and try to pay cash if you can. If not, we'll pay the car off quickly in step 6. If I was buying a new car right now, I'd take a serious look at buying an electric car. The government is incentivizing these right now with tax credits, and they're good for the environment as well. There's an income limit on the federal credits. Your adjusted gross income can't exceed $300,000 married filing jointly or $150,000 single. You do have to buy the car new, and there are some vehicle-specific requirements, so look at these at irs.gov. With electric cars, you can save money on fueling costs. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, electric vehicle owners can save $1,000 a year in fueling costs. Another way to decrease transportation costs is to live close to where you work and shorten the commute. Or if you're feeling adventurous, try walking or biking to work, though these have their own risks. The third category that makes the biggest difference in our spending is food costs. There are many ways to cut this back. First, obviously, is to eat out less. A meal at a restaurant costs many multiples of what it would cost to eat that meal at home. I know not all of us have the time to cook. If you are time-strapped, try batch cooking. Even if you're not, it makes your life so much easier. Basically, what you do is you make a big pot of food one day a week when you have time, and then you pack it in meal-sized amounts for the rest of the week. So now you have a whole bunch of meals ready to go when you need them. Not only does this make life easier, it's also healthier. Another thing most people don't take into account is that grocery costs are variable, depending on where you're shopping. Shopping at expensive stores with pretty displays can significantly increase your grocery costs. Try switching to lower-cost alternatives like Aldi or Walmart, and you can probably halve how much you're spending on groceries. If you like your veggies organic like me, try triaging where you shop for these items. I signed up for a farm share that lets us support a local farm and reduce our carbon footprint in the process. And we get fresh organic veggies for cheaper. Shop for ethnic spices and condiments at ethnic stores rather than big chain grocery stores. Chances are you'll find the prices are much better than the ethnic aisle in your regular grocery store. Other things to talk about when we talk about expenses are entertainment costs. Try streaming instead of cable. Shop around for alternative phone carriers. Carriers like Google Fi or Republic Wireless can be a lot more frugal than Verizon or other big-name carriers for cell phones. Make sure you're looking at all of your subscriptions and be really selective about which ones you keep around. When you start going through your spendings, I'm sure like me, you're going to find subscriptions that you forgot to deactivate because you're not using anymore. Make sure you look at these. The subscription model is based on the fact that we tend to sign up and then forget. So there are so many ways to get frugal. I can't possibly cover them in one episode. But we've covered several of the major spending areas that you'll have to look at in order to streamline your spending. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to cover clever ways to cut costs in the future episodes. So once you get your budget set up and start monitoring your spending, you'll be able to figure out where you need to cut back to make some room for debt payoff. Take that extra cash and start making extra payments to pay off high-interest debt. Once this debt is out of your life, it will be so much easier to build a stable financial future for you and your family. You can do it. Now is the time to get started. Go ahead and list out your debts and see if you have any toxic debt sitting around. If you have credit card debt, I should mention that there is an option to transfer the debt to a 0% card. Transferring to a 0% interest card can work well if you're going to pay it off before the 0% term ends. That way your extra payments will work faster for you to get your debt out of your life. But remember, this is not a long-term strategy. Don't think just because it's now 0% that it's not toxic debt. Credit card debt is toxic and you need to get rid of it. It's time to do it now in step 4. Now for our quote of the day. Many a man thinks he's buying pleasure when he's really selling himself to it. Benjamin Franklin. This is particularly true if you're buying pleasure on a credit card that you cannot afford to pay off at the end of the month. That thing will then command 20% interest from you going forward. It will demand a percentage of your pay and command you to keep working to pay it. Don't sell your freedom for things. Buy what you can afford and pay that credit card debt off. That's an essential step to buying your freedom. Thank you so much for those who have left 5-star reviews on this podcast. Here's one from EMG007007. Good listen. Appreciate her perspective and trust her story will help many on the road to financial freedom. Thank you so much for leaving that podcast review on Apple Podcasts. I know sometimes it's hard to find where to leave a review. I think Apple has the most easy way to do it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that and leave us 5-star reviews and subscribe and spread the word so that we can get this message out to more physicians and healthcare workers. If you have any feedback, suggestions, or questions for me, you can reach me at thefrugalphysician@gmail.com, on Twitter @frugalphysician, or on Facebook at The Frugal Physician. Now, a final word from our sponsor. At Pearson Rabbits, they understand that life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness, injury, or catastrophic event could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Rabbits builds human connections before they create quotes. Visit www.pearsonrabbits.com today and embark on a journey of safeguarding your future. It's time to say goodbye, but fear not, my frugal-minded friends. Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician will be back with more inspiration, knowledge, and money magic. Remember, the journey to financial independence is a marathon, not a sprint. Stay committed to your goals, continue honing your frugal skills, and never forget the incredible power you possess to shape your financial future. Until we meet again, keep embracing frugality and living your best life.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.